I go to Erev Shabbos. This week's Parshas, Parshas Chayei. And before I get into the Dvar Torah, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the tremendous loss that Klal Yisrael suffered this past week or last week, and that is loss of two Torah giants in the world, of David Feinstein and Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs. It's a real loss for Klal Yisrael, for both of them, that both of them are gone. And Rabbi Sachs in particular, I've said his Divrei Torah in the past, and in the spirit of the Gemara that says that when you say the Torah of someone who passed away, that their lips move in the ground, which is metaphorical, of course, and it means that it's a way of keeping them alive. When you say a person's Torah, it's a way of keeping their message alive. So in that spirit, I'd like to say over Dvar Torah from Rabbi Sachs, which is a classic Rabbi Sachs Dvar Torah, that he says on this week's Parsha. This week's Parsha, there's two things that happen. Number one is Sarah passes away. Avram was already an old man, 137 years old at the time, and he immediately springs into action as soon as Sarah dies. He buys the Ma'aras HaMachpelah, he buys a piece of land. It's not a simple sale, it's a complicated negotiation, but he does it, he goes through with it, and he purchases that land and he buries his wife. That's number one. The second thing that happens in this week's Parsha is that right after that, actually, Avram decides that it's time to find a shidduch for his son Yitzchak, and he immediately goes into action with that, puts a whole plan out, sends his messenger to go find a wife for his son, and he's very busy. He keeps himself very busy in his old age, which that itself should be a lesson for everybody. But Rabbi Sachs points out the lesson of this is as follows. HaKadosh Baruch Hu promised to Avram over and over again, 5 or 7 different times in the Torah, 2 different things. Number one, he promised him the land of Eretz Yisrael, that he's going to conquer this land and the land's going to belong to him. Number 2, he promised him that he'll have as many children as the stars in the sky and the sand on the earth. So these 2 promises, which occur again and again and again in the Torah, are big promises, and they're big goals and big visions. But what does Avram do? He starts small. He takes one step. He buys one piece of land, the Ma'aras HaMachpelah. And then, as far as having children, he takes the first step. He marries off his son Yitzchak to ensure future generations. This is the lesson Rabbi Sachs points out that leaders have, but I think it could be a lesson for all of us. Rabbi Sachs says that leaders begin with an envisioned future, but they also know that there's a long journey between here and there. We can only reach it one act at a time, one day at a time. There is no miraculous shortcut. If there were, it wouldn't help. The point is that don't let the big picture get in the way of you taking the first step. It happens so often where even a person who would want to accomplish finishing Shas, for example, start with one Masechta, start with one parak, start with one Amud, start with learning for an hour at a time. Take that first step. If you don't take the first step, nothing's going to happen. Don't let it can be with anything in your life, which is exactly what Avram Avinu did in this week's Parsha. He had this big vision where he had to ensure the future of Klal Yisrael, to build a nation from scratch. He didn't get overwhelmed by that. He married off his son Yitzchak. It's the first step. He knew that the whole land of Eretz Yisrael would be his. Did he conquer everything in one shot? No, he bought one piece of land. He took that first step. And that's a lesson for all of us. That's how we should live our life. Try to take the first step, and the Rabbi Shalom's promise, the Rabbi Shalom's vision will come to fruition. And your vision will come to fruition, but you have to take that first step first in order to accomplish this. May the Nishmas of Rabbi Sachs and of David Feinstein have an Aliyah. Have a wonderful Shabbos.